Hello, welcome to my first Conlang video. This one is on my Conlang Tlsindà, and so this language, this Conlang is, which means constructed language, this Conlang is an artlang, so artistic language, which is also a natlang, so a natural language. What that means is that artlang, it's created for a specific purpose of an art goal in mind, so it's created for fun, really, and so in my position. And natural language, basically that means that it tries to imitate natural languages as possible. So any language that basically exists around the world over the course of us speaking it through over thousands of years. For example, French or English, those are natlangs, those are examples. Whereas Klingon, because we created that, that is not technically a natlang, whereas that is an artistic language. And so this is how you write the name of the language in the Tlsindà script. And so this language is sort of inspired by Vietnamese, also Welsh, and so the writing system slightly by Chinese as well. And slightly actually Icelandic with the sounds like for example. And so let's get on to the writing system. So the writing system is an abugida mostly, and yeah, it is abugida, and it's also slightly featural. And what I mean by featural is that so the symbols of the letters can encode phonetic information. And so for writing systems, the writing system that English speakers have generally is an alphabet. And so you have a symbol for every vowel and every consonant. An abugida, for example, is a writing system where you have the symbols for consonants and then you add bits onto those to change the vowel that comes with it. That's what this system is. Featural means that, so they encode phonetic information. For example, if you have a letter P, let's just say it's a circle, and so if you want to make it a B, you add a dot in the middle, for example. If you want to make it a fricative, you add a line under, change from per to a b, and then it becomes a v, for example. That's the basic idea of a featural system. And so now on to the goal of the artlang. The artlang, so you'll see no labial sounds. If you don't know what labial means, it comes from the word for lips, and so there are no sounds made with the lips. So there's no sounds like ma, wa, ba, sorry for the finger. And so because the speakers of this, I decided they don't have lips, and so they can't make any of those sounds. And so that is the quirk of this language, generally. And so for some background information on the language, the writing system evolved from the Proto-Kelec featural system. So Proto-Kelec is the proto-language of this, and this is part of the Kalecis language family. So it comes from Proto-Kelec featural system, and some symbols were created for the missing sounds which weren't present in Proto-Kelec. So for example, was not present, and pretty much all of the voiced sounds like D weren't in there. So da, ga, they weren't in there. And the uvular sounds, so there are three main groups of sounds. There's uvular, palatal, and alveolar sounds. There were only alveolar and velar sounds at the time. So for a basic overview, alveolar sounds contain sounds like t and d and s and z. So in that general area of the mouth, that's what alveolar describes. And palatal, that describes sounds that you make when you make the sound, for example, ya. And so that's the general area. And also in the Hungarian name, nud, for example. And so velar is sounds that we make when we say king. There's k, and there's also ng at the end. That's the general area. Uvular is a bit further back, and some sounds of uvular are found in French, for example. Rendre, that's uvular, and also in some sounds of Arabic. And so these are some other sounds which I'll get to. So I will give a basic overview of the sounds. So the symbol is in black, and the romanization is in red, and the IPA is in the tealish colour. And so I'll give a quick overview. Cha, ra, ka, ga, la, and la. And so the difference between ga and la is that this one is an implosive. And so what that means is that instead of... Sorry. And so what that means is that instead of just pushing air out, what you do is you raise the glottis inside your throat. You're about to make the sound of la, but you, as soon as you drop the glottis in your throat, you quickly let your mouth let go of that sound of la, and then la appears instead. So it's sort of a bit more, I don't know how to describe it, it's more sort of squelchy sounding, that's the wrong word, but it sounds a bit more emphasised in a way. And so the next sounds are platal, so you get the sounds ya, ya, ka, ga, ya, and nya. And so these are the fricatives. At the top I've got fricatives, and then I've got the plosives, and then I've got other sounds from those groups. These are just completely different. And so then we've got the alveolar plus dental sounds. I'll get onto that in a bit. So we've got tha, the, ta, da, and that is it. And what the dental means is that in the evolution of this language from Proto-Celtic sounds, the tongue has gone against the teeth slightly. And so that means that, so it's gone slightly against the teeth because there used to be a sound of th in the language just before this one, so in old Tlsindà, but then it became a th and the sound. Next on to other sounds, we have na, sha, ja, and la or ra. And so the reason these are other sounds, this is an alveolar sound, na, but I decided not to include it because it's technically a bit different because you're not really meant to have it dental. And then there's sound sha and ja. These are odd because these are lateral sounds. So what that means is that you make it with pushing air through the sides of your tongue and through your mouth. For example, the sound la, what that actually is a lateral liquid. And so you push the middle of your tongue up in the middle of your mouth, and then you get the sound la. And this is the sound which we write as la is interchangeable between la and ra because it changes sometimes. Intervocalically, it's often ra, for example, aro, but when it's the beginning of a word, it's often la, for example, lao. And so this is a basic overview of the consonants. Focus, please. This is a basic overview of the consonants. So of the uvula, we have the palatal, and then we have the alveolar dental sounds, and also the other sounds. Now, on to vowels. So this may look ridiculously complicated, but it does make sense. So remember from the last sheet that this is an abugida system. And so, like I said, abugida systems, you add on parts to the consonants to mark the vowel sounds. So, as you can see, on type 1, there are two types of writing them, type 1 and type 2. Type 1, you add lines to the symbol, and then you add a slight hook as well, if you need to. I'll get onto the hook in a bit. So you add the number of lines corresponds to the type of the vowel. So as you can see, all of these different ones, I'll move this out of the way. So all the types of sounds. And then on type 2, what you do is you add dots instead. This is more common in the actual system, but this tends to be easier with a certain type of stylus which the culture uses, whereas this can be used with a blotted tool, which is more like a nib pen that we use today. And so depending on which type of tool you have, you can write with either of these, it really does not matter. And so what the vowels correspond to, there are 4 different types of vowels. There's a, e, and u. So, for example, you add, for a, for the sound of a, so a, you add 1 line or 1 dot. For E, you add 2 dots or 2 lines. E, you add 3 dots or 3 lines. And U, you add 4 dots or 4 lines. Now, you may also notice that all of these sounds are actually unrounded, and that's because they don't have lips, so they can't make rounded vowels. That's another quirk that's another problem that I had to overcome when I was making this language. And so the hook, what I was talking about earlier, what it actually is, so this means a small hook. So for example, you have a small number of lines or a small sort of dot that you attach it to, you write it like that, for example. But if you have a long number of dots, for example, the difference between that and that, you can see that's a small hook, that's a long hook. Depending on how many lines of dots you have, you write it either way of these two. And so this can either mean that it's a nasal sound, which you write with a tilde on the top of the letter as a diacritic. So for example, ta becomes ta, and this letter is actually a vowel modifier. So what it means, it either becomes nasal or it changes the vowel itself, and you write it as an accent going down, so a grave accent or grave accent over the letter as a diacritic. And so a becomes our, e becomes ear, air becomes air, and u becomes oo. So these are all the vowels, and I will give a quick look through them. So these are all the symbols for the vowels. What I've done, you may notice, is that I haven't done the sounds. So when I've got a sound, for example, for ta, I haven't got the sounds for da, because that would just be reduplication of symbols, so this just makes it much simpler to see. And so these are all the consonants, overview of the consonants, and overview of the vowels of the language. Thank you for watching, and I'm not going to be able to make a video for a while, but please give some feedback on the Consonant, how you think. This was a video that was done really quickly because I just wanted to get my ideas out there. Thank you, and goodbye.